Hey guys, this is Clay Lehman with Resolute Property Management. This video is for those investors out there that are panicked that their tenant may not make their rent payment next month. It's a really scary time for the broader economy, and it's especially scary for those of us that are invested in any type of, I was going to say residential rental properties, but really any type of rental properties. So what we're going to go through today is the process of triage. Triage is a medical term. Basically, as it's stated in 7 Habits, we're going to put the first things first. So first things first, take a deep breath, be calm. It's hard to make good decisions when you're worked up. So take some deep breaths and center yourself. The next thing I'd encourage you to do is assess your situation. Sometimes we can work ourselves into a panic without actually knowing what we're facing. So if you haven't already, sit down and assess what are your monthly expenses on your property. And that'll give you an idea of where to get started. So the next step I would take is to review those expenses and determine if any of them can be adjusted, put off, or reduced. The biggest expense for most of us is our mortgage. Well, there is help available, so I would encourage you to call your servicer to determine if they're able to forbear or put off any of your payments. There have been a lot of chatter, a lot of articles going back and forth, but the message in general is that mortgage providers are being encouraged to work with their owners. I talked to a banker friend of mine here locally, and he said it doesn't matter who you bank with, whether it's a large bank or a local commercial lender. The person that you're going to call on the other end of the line is as concerned as you are about your ability to pay, just like you're concerned about your tenant's ability to pay. They want to work with you. They do not want you to default. So I would encourage you to call your mortgage servicer. Then I would look at any other expenses that you might be able to reduce or adjust, but I would be really cautious about repairs. What I mean by this is don't put off any repairs. We've all made adjustments to just going to emergency only or preservation only repairs during this crisis. But you definitely don't want to, when you're reviewing what expenses you can reduce, you don't want to cut down on your repair expenses. You don't want to not do an expense you don't want to not do a repair, particularly if it might be perceived as being retaliatory against your tenant not paying rent. Ultimately, if you choose not to do repairs that are needed, it'll hurt you more than it will hurt your tenant, and it also leaves you with the potential to end up in court. The next thing to talk about is tenant communications, and this is a little dicey. So this is assuming you're not working with a property manager. Like in our property management company, we actually, it's not just that we encourage that tenants and owners don't speak or communicate. It's actually a part of our contract, and the reason is that our attorneys have advised that owner and tenant communication can often lead to a misunderstanding and leave the tenant feeling like the lease or requirements have been altered. So you do want to be careful with your communication with your tenants. The other thing you don't want to do is make an issue where one doesn't already exist. If you don't already know whether or not your tenant's going to have an issue paying rent, reaching out to them. Some people, you might perceive that it's opening the door for them to say, oh, well, I didn't have a problem, but if you're going to work with me, I'll take advantage of that. But if you're in a position where you just must know whether or not they're going to pay rent, you might reach out to your tenant, but I would definitely encourage you to be compassionate. This is a high stress time for everyone, your tenant included. So reaching out with sort of a heavy-handed pay your rent or else worded document may not be in your best interest. What's in your best interest is to work with the tenant to collect as much money as you can, whether that's through a payment plan or some other arrangement, because frankly, right now, our hands are a little tied with the courts being shut down in most areas. The other thing to consider is that, if your mortgage servicer, if they're working with you to put off some of your mortgage, definitely be that person that's willing to work with the tenant. They've signed a lease and they have a legal right. I would definitely consult your attorney. I'm not trying to provide you with legal advice. I just feel like you're going to be better off in the long run. If you're in a position to work with your tenant, and you do, you're going to have a longer term tenant potentially, and that relationship will definitely be a lot more positive and hopefully lucrative for you. So those are my initial thoughts on what to do. I mean, There is one final thought, and that is that you really need to reflect on if this situation of potentially missing 1 month's rent has put you in a panic that you may lose the home, then you may consider whether or not investing in residential real estate is part of your long-term investment strategy. You really need to have enough margin to be able to absorb an expense like a missed rent, or all of a sudden a roof needing to be replaced, or an AC needing to be replaced, because you can never predict the future. When you operate on too thin of a margin, you put yourself at risk for down the road foreclosure or something of that nature. So it might be time to start thinking about whether or not you should look at exiting your rental portfolio. If you have any questions or want to discuss anything from this video or just from the economy or anything, reach out to us here at Resolute Property Management. No obligation. We just like being good partners with people and having conversations. So I hope everybody's well, and I hope you found this video helpful. Thank you so much.